Night shift footage is supposed to be boring. Grainy, quiet, predictable. Just a building breathing after hours. At 2:13 a.m., the camera in the east hallway catches a janitor cart rolling past the fire doors. A mop bucket. Fresh trash liners stacked like napkins. Rubber gloves snapping onto hands. The worker moves with the calm rhythm of routine. Stop. Wipe a smudge from a baseboard. Bend for a stray cup. Straighten. Keep going. Nothing breaks. No alarms. No struggle. No sudden sprint. And yet, by 2:19 a.m., a person who was definitely inside the building is gone. No blood. No forced entry. No screaming audio spike. Doors still sealed. Locks still green. The only action is what looks like ordinary cleaning. Polishing away the night. It's the cleanest disappearance you can imagine. And that's what makes it terrifying. Mason watched the same 6 minutes of footage until his eyes started inventing details that weren't there. An extra pause, a glance that lasted too long, a wheel squeak that sounded like a signal instead of a defect. He killed the audio, leaned back, and let the security operations center breathe around him. The SOC was a cave of monitors and cold coffee. Server racks hummed. The air conditioning whispered. A wall of screens turned the night into a grid. Doors, hallways, stairwells. Each one a little promise that nothing bad could happen without being seen. Mason had built his career on that promise. Across the desk, Riley didn't sit. She stood with both hands on the back of a chair, knuckles pale. Her badge lanyard was twisted like she'd been winding it for hours. "Tell me again," Mason said. "Evan was here," Riley answered, voice tight. "He texted me at 1:58. Said he found the file. Said he was coming up." Mason pulled up the message log. Same words, same timestamp. No follow-up. No joke, no emoji, none of the little human noise people left behind when they weren't scared. On the incident board behind Riley, someone had written in dry marker, "Missing person, internal, high priority." Under it, the stakes were listed like a checklist, because in corporate security, you learn to translate fear into bullet points. Risk, loss of life. Risk, loss of intellectual property. Risk, reputational damage. Mason's eyes lingered on the last one, because that one had his name attached. Hours earlier, he'd signed off on the overnight access list. It was supposed to be routine. The cleaning crew's badge window, a vendor exception for the service elevator. A temporary override that always came with a "just for tonight" note. Temporary exceptions were how disasters introduced themselves. Now Evan was missing, and the cameras showed nothing but a cart and a mop. Riley swallowed, forcing the words out. He wouldn't just walk out. He was scared. He told me someone had been asking questions about the lab, about the patent. There it was, the second hook in Mason's ribs. The building wasn't just glass and carpet. It held the kind of research that turned into patents, and patents that turned into contracts, and contracts that turned into careers. Mason had seen people get promoted for protecting an idea. He'd also seen people get fired for losing one. He rewound the clip. The janitor cart paused near the corner where Evan had last been spotted on another camera. A quick bend, like picking up trash. A hand disappeared behind the cart frame for half a second. Then the cart rolled on. Riley's voice dropped. "You think this was planned?" Mason stared at the frozen frame, feeling the weight of every green checkmark he'd ever trusted. "I think someone did a perfect job." Riley blinked hard. "So, what do we do?" Mason didn't answer right away, because the honest answer was, "If he's gone for good, I'm done too." He turned back to the screens, to the quiet building pretending nothing had happened, and chose the only kind of answer he could live with. "We find him." Mason said. Alive. Riley's hands tightened on the chair. And if we don't? Mason's jaw set. Then I'm not just losing a case. He looked at the incident board again, at loss of life, and at the line beneath it that might as well have said your career. I'm losing the right to ever say the cameras are enough. Mason didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a small, dull gray case the size of a paperback and set it on the desk like it was fragile. The latch click sounded too loud in the SOC, like he'd just admitted he was about to do something that wouldn't look good in an after-action review. Riley watched with the wary patience people reserved for either magic tricks or bureaucracy. "What is that?" she asked. "A tool," Mason said, "and a risk." He flipped the latches. Inside, foam cradled a handful of items that looked disappointingly harmless. A short roll of clear film, a squeeze bottle with a plain white label, a couple of disposable shoe covers, and a black handheld wand about as thick as a flashlight. Riley blinked. "That's it?" "Most useful things are boring," Mason said. "That's why they work." He lifted the squeeze bottle. The label read, Fe304, dispersion, non-toxic, do not ingest. Riley squinted. "Ink?" "Not ink," Mason said. "A suspension, a liquid full of magnetic nanoparticles." Her eyebrows rose. "Like metal dust?" "Like dust," Mason agreed. "But so small you can't see the grains. Each particle is a tiny speck of iron oxide, magnetite. The same family of material that makes some sand look black. The difference is size." He pinched his fingers close together. Small enough to float in fluid. Small enough to cling to fabric fibers and shoe tread. Small enough to ride along without anybody noticing. Riley stared at the bottle like it might start humming. "And it's safe?" "In small amounts, yes," Mason said. "It's not poison. It's pigment with attitude." He gave her a quick, dry look. "The trick isn't danger. The trick is obedience." He set the bottle down and picked up the clear film. It wasn't tape, not exactly. More like a thin, flexible transfer sheet with a peel-away backing. "This is how you lay a mark without leaving a mark," Mason said. "You place it where you want movement to be tagged. Door thresholds, elevator floors, the corner where someone turns. It deposits a whisper-thin layer of nanoparticles." Riley leaned in. "So, you're tagging the floor?" "Tagging the motion," Mason corrected. "Nobody sees it. Nobody feels it. But when someone steps there, the particles jump to the shoe like burrs on a sock. Then they hitchhike." He mimed footsteps with 2 fingers on the desk. Carpet, tile, concrete, into a car, out of a car. Every step sheds a little, like breadcrumbs you can't see. "And then you—" "What?" Riley asked. "Follow them with a magnet?" Mason lifted the black wand. Not a fridge magnet, a controlled magnetic field. He clicked it on. A soft tone answered, barely audible. "This does 2 jobs. First, it pulls the particles off surfaces. Carpet fibers, rubber tread, floor mats. Second, it measures how much it's pulling." Riley's eyes narrowed. "Measures how?" "Think of a Geiger counter," Mason said. "But for magnetic signal, not radiation. More particles, stronger response. Fewer particles, weaker response." Riley crossed her arms, unconvinced. "So you vacuum invisible dust with a flashlight, and it tells you where someone walked." Mason nodded. "Close enough." He opened a drawer and pulled out an old office shoe, one of his props. Then he grabbed a disposable shoe cover and slipped it over the shoe, keeping things clean for the demo. "Watch," he said. He peeled a strip of the transfer film and pressed it to the floor by the desk. Then he stepped onto it twice, slow and deliberate. Riley's eyes stayed locked on the carpet. When Mason lifted the film away, the floor looked exactly the same. No glitter, no stain, no powder. Nothing that would make a janitor pause or a camera catch anything unusual. Nothing, Riley said, suspicious. That's the point, Mason replied. He lowered the wand and swept it over the spot where the shoe had stepped. The device chirped, soft at first, then sharper as he crossed the exact oval of contact. Riley's posture shifted. Less disbelief, more attention. Mason moved the wand forward in a line toward the door, following the imaginary path of the shoe. The chirps grew faint, then steadied again as he found tiny traces that had rubbed off with each step. It's not perfect, Mason added quickly before she could. Water can scatter it. Gravel can grind it away. If someone changes shoes, the trail drops hard. And if someone knows what this is, they can try to scrub or confuse it. Riley swallowed. But most people won't know. Exactly, Mason said. Most disappearances are messy. This one is clean. He glanced at the looping hallway footage. The cart, the mop bucket, the ordinary motion that had swallowed a person. If they cleaned their way out, Mason said softly, then we need a trail that cleaning can't erase because it was never visible in the first place. Riley's voice came out thin. Can you do it here? For real? Mason closed the case halfway, like he was already bracing for consequences. We can try. He pointed to the map on the nearest screen, to the corner where the cart had paused. We start where ordinary happened, he said. And we see where the shoes went after the camera stopped being honest. The east hallway still smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet, fresh on top, stale underneath. Mason crouched where the cart had paused on the footage. Up close, the corner was painfully ordinary. A scuffed baseboard, a safety poster, a trash can with a perfectly folded liner. Space, Mason murmured, mostly to himself. And patience. He laid a strip of transfer film where a shoe would naturally land if someone leaned down to pick up trash. He pressed, counted to 3, then lifted it away. The floor looked unchanged, no smear, no shine. Riley swallowed. It still looks like nothing. That's the goal, Mason said. He swept the wand low over the carpet. A faint chirp, then sharper. He traced a small oval where pressure had been, like an invisible footprint made of signal instead of dirt. Someone stepped here after the mark was laid, Mason said. Now we follow the shedding. They moved in slow increments down the corridor. The wand chirped in rises and dips, stronger at corners, weaker along open stretches. The trail led through the fire doors and into the service corridor where carpet gave way to concrete. The response thinned, but it was still there, like a radio station at the edge of range. Service elevator, Mason muttered. At the threshold, the chirps spiked hard. Riley's breath caught as if the device had spoken out loud. The elevator delivered them to the parking level. Cool air, exhaust smell, fluorescent lights. Mason stepped out and swept the wand across the floor. Chirp, 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 then nothing. He widened the sweep. Slower, then faster. Still silence. Riley's voice cracked. Where did it go? Mason stared at the rows of cars and the blank concrete. The route ends here. And in that quiet break, the risk became physical. Every minute Evan wasn't found, the word missing got heavier and darker. Time was leaking out. Mason forced himself to breathe like a technician, not a friend of the desperate woman behind him. An abrupt stop means a clean change, he said, not a random fade. Riley blinked hard. Like what? One of 3, Mason said, holding up fingers. They got into a vehicle. They change direction onto a surface that eats the particles. Or they change shoes. Riley stared at him. Changing shoes would erase everything? Not erase. Mason corrected. Reset. The particles are on the tread. You swap the tread, you lose most of the passengers. He returned to the exact point where the trail died and lowered the wand until it nearly brushed the concrete. This time, he didn't look for a line. He looked for mistakes. Tiny scatter, little clumps where someone paused. A faint chirp answered, hugging the base of a pillar. Mason followed it like a whisper. It wasn't a trail anymore. It was a smear. Pivot, pause, weight shift. A moment of indecision captured in invisible dust. Here, he said. Riley leaned in, then stopped herself from stepping closer. What is it? Mason shined his phone light behind a yellow wheel stop. Something dark sat there like discarded trash. A single disposable shoe cover. Mason's chest tightened. That's not ours. Riley's mouth went dry. So they planned to change shoes. Or cover them, Mason said, slipping it into an evidence bag. When he passed the wand over it, the chirps spiked sharply. Loaded, Mason murmured. It's soaked with particles. Riley's eyes widened. So they knew about the mark. Mason nodded once. Which means this isn't a lone, panicked kidnapper. This is someone who anticipated a forensic trick most people don't even know exists. He looked down the parking rows again, and the case shifted in his mind. The disappearance wasn't just clean, it was engineered. Mason didn't run for the exit ramp. Panic wanted him to chase the street. Professionals did something else when they hit a wall. They went backward. He swept the wand around the pillar again, mapping the faint scatter. The smear ended with a clean gap, like someone had stepped up rather than forward. Mason's gaze lifted to the nearest service spot. A matte gray delivery truck sat there with no logo, no company name, no messy personality. It was parked too perfectly, as if it had practiced. That truck, Mason said. Riley frowned. How do you know it matters? Because nobody parks unmarked vehicles in a reserved service bay unless they expect nobody to question them. He crouched by the passenger side and ran the wand along the running board. Chirp, sharp, along the tire, nothing. Along the door handle, a quick spike. Along the rear door handles, a bigger spike, messy and layered. That's recent contact, Mason said, and not just one set of hands. Riley's voice went small, more than one person. Mason swept the bumper and latch area. The signal wasn't neat. It was chaotic, multiple touches, multiple climbs, multiple trips, like a team moving equipment, or a person. Riley swallowed. So the janitor wasn't alone. Mason nodded. Cleaning is perfect cover. Uniforms are invisible. Carts belong everywhere. People don't remember faces if the person is holding a mop. He glanced back toward the stairwell and loading route. And docks are chaos by design. Pallets, carts, contractors. Movement looks like work. Riley's hands trembled. So what are we up against? Mason didn't sugarcoat it. People trained to look harmless. He straightened slowly, the wand still humming in his hand. The building hadn't failed because it was weak. It had failed because it trusted the shape of normal. Back in the SOC, Mason didn't waste time replaying footage again. He pulled up the boring systems nobody respected until they saved your life. Vendor check-ins, work orders, badge exceptions, dock schedules. Riley hovered like a shadow. If they're a team, they'll have a plan. They already did, Mason said, eyes scanning lines of text. We just haven't seen the paperwork yet. One entry sat too clean in the overnight queue. Deep clean, biohazard protocol, level B dock. Riley blinked. Biohazard? We don't do biohazard. Exactly, Mason said. It's a magic word. It makes people stop asking questions and start clearing hallways. He clicked into the approval chain and felt his stomach drop. The order was approved under Evan's account. Riley's face drained. That's Evan. Mason's voice stayed calm, but it took effort. Either they used his credentials or he's under pressure. Either way, it gives us a destination, wherever that deep clean truck is headed. Riley whispered, "So we call the police." "We do," Mason said, "and we also do something they won't expect." He opened the gray case again and pulled out a plain internal courier pouch. Standard, forgettable. Then he slid a strip of transfer film inside and misted it with a nanoparticle suspension so lightly it looked like nothing had happened. Riley stared. "What are you doing?" "Making a breadcrumb that moves," Mason said. "If they take a file from us, they also take the mark, and wherever they bring it, dock, warehouse, buyer, our wand can read the path it traveled." Riley's voice tightened. "You're going to offer them something?" Mason nodded once. "It's the price." "The price of what?" "Of knowing where the next door is," Mason said. "Because right now, the trail ends at the parking garage." He sealed the pouch, the plastic whispering shut like a confession. "And I'm done letting them choose where the story stops." Twist/turning point, 350 to 500 words. They didn't take the bait like amateurs. They took it like people who had practiced taking things. Mason and Riley waited 2 blocks away in an unmarked security SUV, watching a warehouse district that looked asleep but never really was. Streetlights painted long, pale rectangles over chain-link fences. Trucks idled somewhere out of sight, their engines a low, patient rumble. Across the street, a steel side door opened. 2 figures in coveralls stepped out first, faces masked, posture calm, hands busy. They pushed a rolling equipment case like it belonged to them, like the world always made room. Then a third person appeared between them. Evan. Riley made a sound that wasn't a word. Her hand went to the door handle. Mason caught her wrist. "Wait." She looked at him with a kind of fury that was really fear. "That's him." "I know," Mason said. "Just watch." Evan wasn't dragged. He wasn't stumbling. He walked on his own feet, but his shoulders were wrong, tight, controlled, like his body had been taught what would happen if it protested. They guided him to the rear of the unmarked truck. The equipment case went in first. Evan climbed up after it. Right before he disappeared inside, Evan made a tiny motion at his ankle, a tug at fabric, a glance down so fast it could have been a twitch. Mason's mind snapped into focus. He wasn't checking the ground, he was checking his shoe. He knew about the particles, about the transfer, about the invisible trail. Either Mason's tech wasn't as secret as he'd believed, or Evan had been close enough to the research side of the building to have heard rumors. Riley whispered, "What is he doing?" "He's trying to help," Mason said, surprised by the ache in his chest. "Or trying to apologize." His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop following, or she loses him." Mason showed Riley. Her face turned to ice. "They're watching us?" she said. "Good," Mason replied. Riley stared. "Good?" "It means they're nervous," Mason said. "And nervous people make mistakes." He watched the coveralls move. Efficient, quiet, professional. Not kidnappers looking for ransom, operators moving a package. And the package wasn't just Evan. It was access. A human key to unlock something that couldn't simply be stolen off a server. Mason replayed Riley's words in his head. The patent, the lab, the file .*. This wasn't a disappearance to make someone vanish. It was a disappearance to make someone cooperate. Riley's voice shook. Why would Evan? Mason didn't let her finish the sentence, because blaming Evan would be the easiest story. And the easiest story was usually wrong. Because someone put him in a corner, Mason said, and the corner had conditions. He looked through the windshield as the truck doors closed, as the team melted back into the warehouse like they'd never existed. Evan isn't just a victim, Mason said softly. Riley's eyes filled. What is he then? Mason tightened his grip on the wand case in his lap, the boring gray box that now felt like a lifeline. He's leverage, Mason said, and he's the lock they're using him to open. Final, happy ending, 350 to 500 words. The truck didn't rush. That was the scariest part. It moved through the city like it belonged. Steady speed, clean lane changes, no sudden turns that screamed crime. Professionals didn't sprint. They blended. Mason followed at a distance, headlights off the bumper, Riley rigid in the passenger seat. The courier pouch sat between them like a fragile lie. They weren't chasing the truck anymore. They were letting it lead them to the part of the plan that needed a witness. The route ended at a glass-front building with a private loading bay. One of those innovation campuses that looked like money spent to make money. No sign out front, just a security gate and a keypad. The kind of place that never wanted attention. Buyer, Mason said, almost to himself. Riley stared at the clean architecture like it offended her. They're going to sell it, like it's nothing. Mason pulled into a dark corner across the street and opened the gray case. He didn't need to breach the building. He didn't need to guess which room. He needed one thing: confirmation that the bait had crossed the threshold. He stepped out into the cold air and swept the wand low along the edge of the loading bay entrance, close to the concrete where shoes did all the honest work. The device chirped, soft, then stronger. He moved a few inches, and it spiked in a clear line. There, Mason whispered. Riley leaned in, watching his hands. So it worked. It worked, Mason confirmed. They carried the pouch inside. He swept again, slower, careful. The strong signal was the pouch trail, fresh, dense, confident. But alongside it, he caught something else. A second signature, thinner and uneven, like a ghost walking parallel to the main line. Riley's voice trembled. What is that? Mason didn't look up. A second set of shoes. He stood and met her eyes. They brought Evan in. Riley's hand flew to her mouth, relief and dread colliding. He's here. Mason nodded once. And this is where their plan is weakest. How? Riley asked. Because they're thinking about a deal, Mason said. About paperwork, money, handshakes. His jaw tightened. They're not thinking about an active missing person case. They're not prepared for the kind of response that comes with the word detainment. He stepped back into the SUV and made the call he'd been holding in his chest all night. Not vague, not cautious. Active corporate espion linked to unlawful detention, he said, voice clipped and clear. We have live location. We have probable cause. We have an endangered person. He gave the address. He gave the gate code he'd pulled from the vendor work order. He gave the shortest version of the truth that would make the right people move fast. Then he sat very still. The next 10 minutes felt like an hour. When the first units arrived, they moved clean. No panic, no shouting into the night. A coordinated sweep, a breach at the loading bay. Doors opening in the harsh light of authority. Mason and Riley stayed back until they were waved in. Inside, the building smelled like expensive coffee and new carpet. They found Evan in a small conference room, sitting upright, pale, but alive. A water bottle in front of him like someone had tried to make captivity look polite. Riley crossed the room in 2 steps and grabbed him like she could anchor him back to the world by sheer force. Evan's hands shook as he held her sleeve. His eyes met Mason's over her shoulder. "I thought I could control it," Evan said quietly. Mason kept his voice low. "They promised you an exit." Evan swallowed. "They promised me protection, money, a clean break." His gaze flicked to Riley, ashamed. "Then they showed me her apartment door and said the break wouldn't be clean." Riley went still, the truth landing like a weight. Mason let the silence do its work, then asked the only question that mattered. "You checked your shoe back there?" Evan's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I didn't know if you'd notice." "I noticed," Mason said. Later, after statements, after cuffs, after the first pink bruise of sunrise on the horizon, Mason stood in the SOC again. The incident board had changed. The words "missing person" were gone, replaced with something uglier and more satisfying: resolved, arrests, recovered assets. A supervisor named Dana approached with a plastic sleeve in hand, a new badge, a new access tier. "You took a risk," Dana said. "You also brought someone back alive and stopped a theft that would have cost us years." Mason accepted the badge, feeling its weight. "Major cases," Dana added. "And that magnet dust method, you're briefing the team." Mason glanced through the glass to where Riley sat beside Evan. Both of them exhausted, both of them still here. He looked down at the wand. Simple plastic, simple metal. A tool that turned invisible mistakes into visible truth. The world hadn't become safe, but it had become harder to vanish someone without leaving a story behind. And for now, that was enough.